Today, 20th August 2024, we are going to discuss editorials of The Hindu and one article from Business Standard. Today's quote, knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. It was told by Aristotle. Many a time we don't understand our strengths, weaknesses. We should understand our strength and weaknesses, and in this way it leads to opportunities, and we can understand our threats also. With this analysis, we can make a huge impact. Many of the developed people in the present day, they understood about themselves and they started in this direction, so they realized their true potential. So knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. So this was told by Aristotle, who taught extensively about wisdom and related concepts. Without further delay, we will discuss first article. This article is from Business Standard. It talks about corporate governance, how we need to revamp corporate governance in the present era. Economy of independent India since independence gone through two major episodes of policy transformation. Any economy policy is very important. First thing, in 1951 we launched a 5-year plan. 5-year plan. In the first 5-year plan, we almost implemented 12 to 14 5-year plans. Then recently Planning Commission abolished, and then Niti Aayog came into picture when Narendra Modi led BJP government took over. So they started Niti Aayog. So till then, since 1951, they launched 5-year plans. First 5-year plan focused on planned development. The second most rapid policy transformation took place in 1991. You know why that? LPG reforms, liberalization, privatization, globalization. Indian economy faced balance of payment crisis, and we got grant from IMF and World Bank. So they put a lot of economic sanctions on the country, told country to open up its market. So we went to liberalization, privatization, globalization impact. Both this impact led to growth in the processes, but also they differed substantially in the role envisaged by the government. How government involved in this process. Impact of these two transformation evident in the growth, investment, even trade pattern of the economy indicated in the accompanying like table. We can see one table in the upcoming slide. See, in third more factor is no, there is a low growth in mid 16 to end of the 70s. Why mid 16? 1965 to even 19 till 1979, 1918. This period was very turmoil period where major political shift was happening, where India's emergency period, 1976, 75, it was 1975, 76. This was imposed by Indira Gandhi. This period marked by a lot of drought, even agriculture also faced a lot of issue, even political turmoil as we discussed. The change brought up by this 1951-52 transformation, this is a modest and it represents substantial transformation. Why? Because there is a ninefold increase from 0.5% of average annual growth rate that has prevailed in the preceding independence. Before independence, so there was very low growth, and then it has increased almost 9 times. Focus on economic policy during first period was emphasis on this public sector development and especially heavy industries. Though private investment also blossomed, the private investment figures show like private investment also came handy during this period. Initially, when independence happens, basically countries rely more cautious on their development plan, but India went along with both private investment along with government investment. We followed socialist model where both capitalism, we didn't go for capitalist economy, we followed both socialist measures. Growth to production was not seen as a possibility. Why? Because this is a global trade shifted in the mid 60s only. If you see this table, India's economic performance, you can see even 1951 to 52, 64 to 65, average annual rate of growth in gross national income is 4.3%. You can see recent period it has grown 5.6, 5.4, even 5.9 till date. Right? Even public sector gross fixed capital formation as percent of GDP, if you see 1980 huge formation is there, but we maintain steady figures. When goes to private sector, you see 8.4%, 10%. Private sector participation increased after 1991. Obviously, private sector participation because of this LPG reforms. So basically, average annual growth rate per dollar value, you can see you don't need to consider these figures, but you need to remember that how corporate sector happened. The higher growth rate clearly happening began by 1980, and then by the time it reached 1991, where we followed this LPG reforms, it has reached top level. Apart from government control on investment and foreign trade, major change from past was opening up of the bank and mutual funds to private sector. Radical reform of the share purchase event transfer mechanism. Author says that this financial liberalization is much bigger change than the pre-liberalization policy approach of the delicensing industrial investment. There was, you might be knowing, license Raj. Whenever, suppose say, a person A is there, he want to start industry, then he goes to government and he wants to obtain license. Then during the time, many bureaucrats and politicians will be there, right? They will demand the bribes. So in order to get the license, that license has become a huge nuisance during independence time. So many people didn't get opportunity, and then a lot of corruptions prevailed. This liberalization, financial liberalization, helped much of the people. Why? Because see, prior to this public limited companies, non-government public limited companies prior to 1981-82, they get around some 600 crores only, but consider present day, they can raise almost 1.5 trillion of amount from the market through capital issue, through share market, so this was the like issue prevailing in the previous time. The shift towards outward export oriented growth is less obvious. So even our export policy is also not much aligned with our development plans. In 1951, India's share in the world merchandise export is 1.9%. It fell 0.4% to 1980 because, as we discussed, political turmoil, shift in the agricultural policies, even a lot of issues happening internally in the country. Since then, the export has grown steadily during eighth year with high growth phase from 2003 onwards. India doubled its share in the world manufacturing exports, but it has now reached 1.8%, still slightly below the 1951 share. So you can understand. So our growth rate was very high in the 1951, but our policies were not designed as per export. Even if you see service sector, India focused more on the service sector. So our policy transformation, these growth plans, agriculture, manufacturing and service sector, we directly jumped from agriculture to service sector. In agriculture we brought green revolution. In manufacturing sector, we didn't focus much. Actually, we established PSUs and many other industries, but we neglected this area. We jumped into service export. This was evident. If you see, in 1990, prior to 1990, there was 0.6% growth rate. Now 4.3%. It's almost like very huge. What are these changes in government and corporate relationship that we require, like if we want to become Viksit Bharat by 2047, government aspiring to become $30 trillion economy by 2047, almost first or second most developed nations by 2047. So what are all the things need to be taken? The most obvious thing, shift in the relationship between government and the private sector from partnership that promotes corporations to one where government is not business friendly but market friendly and has neutral competition with all corporations. Government should maintain neutral relationship. There is a ease of doing business. This need to be maintained, and then government should not be involved in the business. Government is to run the society and take care of the society. Government has no right to do the business. Minimum government, maximum governance, that is the policy that should be followed. The argument for this is not just to avoid like crony capitalism, even corruption, because as we discussed license laws, this leads to cronyism and corruption because a lot of politicians and bureaucrats will be involved. This also recognize our politicians and bureaucrats are not knowledgeable about this technology, product, processes, even market development, as today's corporate executives are. See, today, recent days, there is a Facebook has come, digital media has gone like anything, artificial intelligence, machine learning, all these things. All these the developments are happening in the background, But whether our bureaucrats and politicians are capable with such a development, whether they have such a knowledge, no. Not only to avoid this crony capitalism, we need to hand over to private sector. We need to give freedom to private sector so that a lot of development come. Even government should move away from production linked incentive scheme. This production linked incentive scheme involves a lot of involvement of the bureaucrats. Then these bureaucrats will be involved in the private sector. Then it this hampers corporate governance. Even same goes with the goods and service tax, even trade tax policies also. If you want to make India a very developed nation by 2047, so investment should grow. When investment will come, government regulations stops. Suppose say one foreign vendor is coming, he want to start plant in India. Though we need to safeguard our country, at the same time we need to give freedom to them so that they can establish plant, they can run as per their own norms, and we need to give some time for them so that like actual growth can be anticipated. If this comprehensive neutrality by government cannot be maintained, at least ensure that the recognition of specific producer interest in exception rather than the rule. That's what like you need to understand their ignorance. The most important policy initiative must be to raise competence, even effective impact of the competition commission. We need to improve the competition. There is a competition commission of India which ensures competition. What happens when competition is there? This effective competition policy, potential impact in this market management dynamism. Even private corporate sector, they can very well follow that. Today, if you see, most of the businesses are family owned, family denoted. See, Adani, Ambani, I'm not taking the examples of them, but see, most of the family enterprises, so they go by family names. They will go by family names, run for years. There are even small businesses which are being left out. If competition can be ensured, if competition can be brought up, so these family businesses can turn into actual businesses, so there will be more businessmen come into picture, and then it will become win-win situation for both government and even businessmen also. Strengthening competition and then ensuring government neutrality with relationship with corporation. This lead to shift in corporate strategies. Investment from public and private sector makes redesign of the government policy about private corporate sector key requirement for goal making India as a developed, at least upper income developed country. So what happens today? India is a middle income or low income country. We want to move to middle income or high income country. We need to make consistent efforts. We have discussed about Korea's model, South Korea, how they moved from middle low income to high income countries. Korea is a very small country than India, but they followed such a policy. If we take such measures, we even discuss it may take 50 or more years to follow such approach. There is a substantial public corporate sector. Even if you see, there are PSUs are there today. Government is thinking PSUs are liability, they are hampering innovation, they are hampering the working hours. But government should consider them as the alternatives. PSUs, see, there are some PSUs such as BPCL, even IOCL. They perform like even private players. They generate huge profit. The only thing they lack is support. When proper support is given, proper training and emphasis is given on such a corporate sector, so they can involve technological development. Even people are very well qualified, they comes from very backgrounds such as like IIMs, IITs, and even NITs also. Students from such a colleges, they bring good talent, and also they can it can really nurtured. Besides that, see, one sector, when in private, suppose say only one sector in private is there, now you are privatizing PSUs also, then they will take over this entire thing, then they will monopolize. When monopoly happens, they control prices. Prices increase like anything, then competition will be less. Then the growth in the market slowly dies, and then it monopoly becomes. Then family run business will happen. So this shift need to be avoided. So the policy for corporate governance, it expands from freedom, will not be politically attractive if it is in a like mass support. Suppose say PSUs, if you want to diversify, it is not a politically attractive. So political acceptability from mass will come if government make more involvement in this non-corporate private sector. Some divergence will come there. Even high income inequalities are there, their government can make a lot of impact. Even regional disparities are there, caste related concerns are there. These things need to be addressed by the government. This is role of democratically elected government in a free market capitalist economy. Hence the message in first 5-year plan. What was the message? The economic condition of a country at any given time is product of broader social environment. Economic planning has to be viewed as an integral part of wider process, aiming not merely development of resources in a narrow technical sense, but development of human facilities, building up of institutional frameworks adequate to the needs of the aspiration of the people. Basically, our founding fathers, even the politicians, during when they formed government in the aftermath of independence. So they envisaged all these things. These things are very important. These things means country development should happen at any cost. So we need to improve the governance. This is this article about. The next article, there is a tyranny of inequality. We will discuss this article in detail. This article, it focuses on a lot of analytical issues. Anyhow, we'll discuss them. The French novelist Honoré de Balzac, he wrote, behind every great fortune, there is a crime, right? This is the best half truth. It overlooks, income, wealth accumulation also breeds serious offenses and crimes. Those who amass wealth on one side, there is always two sides of the coin. One side wealth, another side is crime. What are all the offenses they have carried out, even crimes they have carried out to become the wealth? There are several surveys have been carried out. That's what author says. Gallup World Poll, GWP survey, Gallup World Poll in 2019 to 23, Center for Monitoring Indian Economy, CMIE, Consumer Pyramid Housing Survey, income inequality breeds, corruption in the intersection of the government and business. For example, approval of the contract by public official of mega infrastructure project. Even we have seen Satyendra Dubey, I guess, Satyendra Dubey in National Highway Authority. He found out the corruption and then he reported to authority, but eventually he was killed. He is IAS officer there. So such a kind of corruption happens in the such a mega project because these politically rich people, they influence the private investment. Once rich, the greed for more wealth, this negates these moral values. Even pursuing, like they follow these all corrupt strategies. Wealth accumulation becomes easier also. Market share manipulation, political lobbying, even contracts in high infrastructure projects, investment in offshore funds. These are all the several measures adopted by politically even these rich people. In a study by Thomas Piketty et al., they have drawn attention to the escalation of wealth and income inequality in India over last 2 decades, especially 2014 to 2022. They have carried out the survey. Top 1%, see, top 1%. They hold control over 40% of the total wealth in India. That is up from 12.5%. You can see how much wealthier getting wealthier, poor became poorer. So this is one quote, awesome quote actually. So this is what happening, 12.5% to 40%, even more than that. Top 1% income earners made 22.26 of the total pre-tax income, up from 7.3%. You can understand that without tax also they are earning so much. India is now most unequal countries in the world. Yet few studies analyze these adverse effect of this rising income inequality. Author says their objective is to explore the relationship between income inequality and corruption. Specifically, author investigate whether this higher income inequality led corruption between government and business in the 2014 to 2022 period. There are two surveys are there, National Sample Survey, Household Expenditure Survey in 2018-22. They are not directly compared to the National Sample Survey round in 2012 and Gallup World Poll Survey, even Center for Monitoring Data, this CMI data for fallback option. Even GWP has a small sample. It represents a country as a large and diverse India cannot be taken as a face value. But this GWP survey, it has several merits. You can see there are data available on the corruption. Not it is not easily to measure. How you measure the corruption? There are not certain metrics are available. So this is very good thing. Even author says they have used Piketty measures of income inequality that define like what is income inequality? The ratio of share of 1%, 1% to bottom 50%. Suppose say first 1%, then 49% and 50%. So first 1%, this is like, if this is the pie, this is 1%, this is 49%, this is 50%. The top 1% gets 40 plus wealth. Suppose 100 rupees are there, they'll get 40. Rest 99 people are getting 60 rupees. You can consider, like how much variation is there inside them. That's what I say. They have considered Gallup survey, even Piketty survey also. They have defined income inequality as top 1% to the top bottom 50% of the population of total income. This inequality consumption expenditure is usually lower than that of the income distribution. They have preferred the former. That means a GWP because of its greater reliability. Corruption, what do you mean by corruption? Corruption is use of public office for private gain, and this leaves out corruption within the businesses. Suppose say insider trading is happening, suppose say one person is there from government, he informs the businesses that some investment is happening, then suddenly the stock prices of this company rises. Then this is called insider trading. Even someone working in the company giving information to business people so that they can influence heavily, they can make huge investment in the company, and then they can influence the choice. Like normal people, like we, like us, so we will invest knowing that stock prices are growing, but all of a sudden we find that suddenly it falls. So these are the lot of issues, that is how they manipulate. So there is a broader and more comprehensive definition to use of public resources by executive in both public and private sector for private gain, without overlooking this role of politicians. This Gallup survey asks the questions whether corruption is widespread. If corruption is widespread, then Gallup survey says yes, it is. Then it gives rank one. Like that, by adding all these things up, they will bring that one measure that is called corruption. This corruption is based on these individual perceptions. There are three manifestation of corruption. That's what author says. Three types of corruption take place. One in government, those public official holding government office, they are using for their personal opinion. Those businesses, businessmen, they are working in the company, so they will influence the decisions through share market or any other measures. So that is a business corporation. Then intersection, right? This is business. This is government. This is the intersection. There, corruption is very high. Like this is the interaction area. Author says we will focus on this relation between the inequality and corruption in the intersection. Whether award of this contract by government to build ports is influenced by bribe offered by rich investors. Basically what happens, suppose government bring one policy, they want to build one port, so what they will do, so this politically rich businessman will go and meet the government, they will ask lobbying, that is called lobbying. They will ask the ministry to make policy in such a way that it will benefit them. In a way, politicians will get bribes, and then it will definitely both help both of them. This corruption has rise following this globalization, because after globalization there is a huge competition for resources because they are very valuable. Even regulatory agencies licensing their allocations, they are become very subservient to powerful business interest. Even there are more corrupt public officials also. Besides, if we see Make in India scheme, we have brought it up, we have brought, like there is no major impact in macroeconomic indicators such as like manufacturing, foreign direct investment, exports, employment have registered like an increase. There is very less, none of these things will say. Even Make in India also, that's what others says. Even cornies in India SA, there is hike on import tariff and tax cuts. Like that is distortionary. It varies from company to company. This means that there is a possibility of greater rent seeking by rich and influential investors. This rent seeking, what do you mean by rent seeking? They use the resources to capture, monetary gain from external elements, from government, even public agencies, whether through directly or indirectly, without giving anything return to them or to the society. Basically, societal resources they are taking directly by just giving bribes to the corrupt people. When you give corrupt people, they take the bribe, but whether it benefits the society or not, we do not know. So this economic rent causes dissipation of resources that even potentially damages and then waste associated with this thing. Groups struggling for rent, they invest money and time in transfer of wealth rather than the creation of wealth. Corruption intersection in the government and business remained high between 2014-22. It is likely rent seeking persisted high level too, because corruption is huge happening. So this rent seeking might have persisted. Even author quotes about Hindenburg report. Hindenburg report involved in the SEBI's chair and her husband in this Adani offshore fund. They have discussed many things about this. Basically, author says Adani involved Adani's this SEBI's chairman and then her husband, both involved in the Adani Group offshore fund, and then price increased. This Hindenburg Group reports initially they removed it, but they again brought these things. So these are all things indicates that there is a corruption. We find that, even author says inequality was fueled by speculative investment in mutual funds, even savings in fixed deposits, even post offices. This curbed it, like reduced. Trust in the judiciary was driven by conviction rate, even moderated by its square, implying that trust rose but at a diminishing rate. Five almost 4 to 5 crore cases are pending in our judicial cases. Even author says they found that higher income inequality causes widespread corruption, while greater confidence in judiciary it reduces the corruption. Budget missed the opportunity to tax rich. This taxing rich at higher rate, even greater transparency, accountability of the regulatory agencies remain even big issue. Both more competitive political system, private businesses are there are facing a lot of challenges. Their potential for more prosperous India is hard to dispute. So there are private companies at one area we need to put a lot of emphasis on our 2047 goal, but at the same time our governance model should be very clear, right? Their involvement in countries development is very important, but these corruption activities need to be taken care of. If suppose again and again Hindenburg coming with report, or even there are wealth inequality report is happening in such a way, these things need to be taken care of. This is about the article. These are all the personal opinions given by authors, so you can use anywhere. The next article, protecting Indian capital in the Bangladesh, right? This article, basically, as we know, Bangladesh recently faced political turmoil. Former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina resigned and then fled to India. So now it has become uncertain condition in our eastern neighbor. We almost face a 4,096.7 kilometer land border with Bangladesh. There is a political and diplomatic fallout crisis in India. There is another significant aspect. Indian companies operating in the Bangladesh. Indian companies invested heavily in Bangladesh. There are several sectors: edible oil, power, infrastructure, fast-moving consumer goods, automobiles, even pharmaceuticals also. Despite all this opposition, Sheikh Hasina's government they rolled red carpet for Indian investors. Even they adopted several measures to invite them. They started special economic zones to huge investment in the Bangladesh. Unhappy with it, the India's support to Ms. Hasina's regime, opponents in Bangladesh, they launched boycott India, India out boycott movement targeting Indian goods. Now, Ms. Hasina, she is no longer in power. She left the power. So the interim government or new government, whatever it may follow, like they may approach this hostile attitude towards these Indian companies. It might change these existing laws, adopt new regulatory measures that will definitely, adversely impact our Indian capital. What are the options our Indian businesses have in such eventuality? What we need to take? Even Jeswald Salukis, the author, he argues that see there are three things, three legal frameworks in such scenario, right? Domestic laws of the country where investment is made. Suppose Bangladesh we have made, there are domestic laws. With the domestic laws we can protect. Second, contracts may have been signed between foreign investors and the government on host state, among foreign investors and companies of the host state. So this on this also we can have legally argue. There are even international law. This contains treaties, customs, even general legal principles that contained in the status of the international law. Indian companies that have invested in Bangladesh can use the first two legal framework to protect their investment in regulatory risk. Indian companies can rely on Bangladesh Foreign Private Investment Promotion and Protection Act, Bangladesh Foreign Private Protection. There is one act, so based on this act, they can make the legal comments. But there are limitations on relying this domestic law of the host state because the host state, Bangladesh, newly formed government can unilaterally change on their interest. Likewise, contracts may be limited value when it comes to challenging the sovereign actions. When it goes to the country, your contract is very less when compared to the sovereign nation. Therefore, we need to rely on the third legal framework, that is the international law. It becomes very important, right? In India, Bangladesh bilateral investment, international law cannot be changed unilaterally. This can be used, hold states, that means nations, accountable for their sovereign actions. Nations cannot take sovereign actions on the company on their whim and fancies. When protecting foreign investment, the most crucial instrument in international law is bilateral investment treaty, right? What is this bilateral investment treaty? This is a treaty between two countries. It aimed at protecting investment made by investors of the both the countries. This bilateral investment treaty protect investment by imposing conditions on the regulatory behavior of this host state. Even it prevents undue interference in the foreign investor rights. State cannot multilaterally or unilaterally altogether it can alterate all the conditions. These conditions, there are several conditions, restricting host state from unlawfully expropriating the investments, imposing obligations on host state to afford fair and equitable treatment, FET. This is very, very important. You should give the same fair and equitable treatment. Now government has fallen, they will be in huge turmoil. They have invested some crores, billions of money there. Even not to discriminate against the foreign investment. These things it talks about bilateral investment treaty, fair and equitable treatment. Remember that one. Bilateral also empower foreign investor to directly sue the host state before international tribunal. There are international court of justice is there in Hague, Netherlands. So there you can go and file a case. This is known as Investor State Dispute Settlement (ISDS). According to United Nations Conference on Trade and Development (UNACTAD), by end of 2023, there are almost investor state dispute claims almost amounting to 1332 numbers. In case of advanced sovereign regulation, Indian companies can rely on this India Bangladesh bilateral investment treaty signed in 2009. Right? India Bangladesh signed, but there is issue with this BIT signed between India and Bangladesh. India unilaterally terminated almost all BITs. The one with Bangladesh continues to exist. All BITs are removed, but Bangladesh we are still continuing. India-Bangladesh bilateral investment treaty, it contains broad, substantive investment protection features. Unqualified FET provision. That can come in handy for Indian companies challenging Bangladesh sovereign regulatory conduct. But there is a twist in this thing, like bilateral investment treaty that happened between Bangladesh and India. There is a joint interpretative notes. What it says, India and Bangladesh adopted in 2017 to clarify the meaning of various terms in 2009 treaty. This joint interpretation notes, as a part of this BIT, it was adopted by India's insistence, overhauling its investment treaty practices to safeguard regulatory power. India proposed joint investment notes to several countries. This was done without considering whether India was offensive or defensive interest in this specific country. So what kind of this, like offensive we need to follow, defensive we need to follow, these things were not discussed. All these things. This JAN diluted the investment protection feature in the BIT. Basically, this JAN will not help us now. Beat taxation measures are excluded from the ambit of BIT. So JAN, we discussed BIT. From BIT, they made simple notes from JAN. From JAN, we are getting nothing. Right? This is what happening. Likewise, fair and equitable treatment provision is linked to this customary international law that would require higher threshold to show violation of the treaty. This JAN has been designed from perspective of the capital importing country to safeguard regulatory conduct from ISDS claims. Between India and Bangladesh, New Delhi is the capital exporter and Dhaka is the importer. So, ironically, JAN that India developed might work to the advantage of Bangladesh. It will not work for us. So, whatever the action they are imposing, it will basically, our investor will be doomed. But we need to question one large question. What we need to do? Bangladesh provides immediate reference point. The issue is not restricted to India's eastern neighbor. India's outbound investment have grown manifold. According to the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, as on 2023, we almost invested 13.5 billion with foreign direct investment. India is among 20 capital exporting countries to Bangladesh, top 20. It is the issue of legal protection for Indian companies abroad assumes this salient point. India should evolve its investment treaty. So now we have learned with this, whatever the happening, we could have learned from Sri Lanka itself. Sri Lanka turmoil happened. During that time, we could have learned this bilateral investment treaty, even joint investigation notes, ISDS claims, all these things we should have taken care. So what author says, India should evolve its investment treaty practice, keeping both even host and home status in mind, not just like farmers. We evolved from our point of view, from Indian point of view, but we completely left host nation. So now we need to consider host nation also. Now recent days political turmoil is happening in South Asia. If we consider many area, even Pakistan is going bankrupt. Pakistan, we don't have trade, but anyhow, this is our neighboring country. Bangladesh, you might have seen now recently the issue is happening. Myanmar, there is a political turmoil. Even Rohingyas come from there to India, right? Even Sri Lanka entire economy collapse, government collapse. Even their president Rajapaksa, he fled to another country. The similar case with Bangladesh also. All our neighbors are failing. So it is high time. Even Nepal also. Nepal is our neighboring country. Nepal, though communist government is there, KP Oli Sharma. So that government also faced a lot of issue. A lot of issues are happening. So government must evolve its investment treaty practice so that our investor can be safeguarded. So this is the article about today. Thank you. Thank you very much for the discussion.